You probably know Britain for its castles, its green countryside, and its eye-watering cost of living. But there is another side to this country that most people never talk about. Places where a room costs less than your monthly phone and internet bill combined. Places where entire terraced houses sell for less than a parking space in London. A town that was once the cotton-weaving capital of the entire world, now one of the cheapest places to live in the United Kingdom. A Scottish port that built some of the finest ships ever to sail, now losing thousands of residents every decade. A seaside resort that once welcomed millions, now offering rooms for a fraction of what you would pay almost anywhere else. In this video, we are counting down 15 British places where you can genuinely live for under £300 a month. And stay with me to the end, because number 1 is a place with one of the most dramatic rise and fall stories in all of British industrial history. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's begin. Number 15, Alasdair, Cumbria. If you follow the A66 west from Penrith past the last fells of the Lake District, you eventually reach a stretch of Cumbria that feels a world away from the tourist trail. This is Alasdair. The towns of Workington and Maryport sit along a windswept coastline. Their high streets quieter than they once were, their terraced rows solid and unpretentious. You can find rooms in shared houses here for well under £300 a month. Some studios and bedsits come in even lower. It was not always this quiet. Workington was once a powerhouse of iron and steel. The Moss Bay Steelworks at its peak employed thousands, and the town's docks, rails and steel products across the world. Coal mining ran deep beneath the surrounding villages, and the railways connected this corner of West Cumbria to the industrial heartlands of the north. But the steelworks closed in stages through the 1970s and 1980s. The mines went with them. The population drifted away. Today, if you walk along the Workington waterfront, you will find regeneration projects slowly reshaping the harbour, and the Sosway coast stretches out to the north, beautiful and largely overlooked. Alasdair is not glamorous, but for under £300 a month, you get the Lake District on your doorstep and some of the most affordable housing in England. Number 14. Pendle, Lancashire. Tucked into the eastern edge of Lancashire, beneath the dark shoulder of Pendle Hill, sits a borough that most people only know for one thing: the famous witch trials of 1612. But Pendle is more than folklore. Its towns, Nelson and Colne, were built on cotton. Mill after mill rose along the valleys. In the 19th century, their chimneys marking the skyline like a second set of hills. By 1900, these small towns were producing cloth that was shipped to every corner of the British Empire. The Leeds and Liverpool Canal carried the raw cotton in and the finished goods out. Terraced streets climbed the hillsides, packed with families who worked the looms. Then the industry collapsed. Japanese and Indian manufacturers undercut Lancashire prices. Mills closed one by one through the middle of the 20th century. The last looms fell silent. Terraces that once housed a booming workforce became some of the cheapest properties in England. Today, you can rent a room in Pendle for comfortably under £300 a month. The hills are still there, the canal still threads through the valley, and on a clear day, Pendle Hill watches over it all, just as it did 4 centuries ago when 12 people were marched from these villages to stand trial in Lancaster. Number 13. Powys, Mid-Wales. Drive west from the English border into the green heart of Wales, and the landscape opens up into something vast and quiet. Powys is the largest county in Wales by area, but one of the least populated. It stretches from the Brecon Beacons in the south to the hills above Welshpool in the north. Towns like Newtown, Landrindod Wells and Brecon sit miles apart, connected by narrow roads that wind through valleys where sheep outnumber people many times over. Average rents across Powys are among the lowest in Wales, and Wales already has the lowest average rents in Great Britain. Shared accommodation and small flats in market towns can be found well below £300 a month. Powys was never heavily industrialised. Its economy ran on agriculture, wool, and the spa trade that brought Victorian visitors to Landrindod Wells. When the spas fell out of fashion and farming mechanised, the population thinned. Young people left for Cardiff, Swansea, or England. The villages stayed, but many of them shrank. If you visit Landrindod Wells today, you will find a handsome Victorian town with wide streets, ornamental gardens, and an air of gentle quietness. It is beautiful, it is remote, and for anyone who can work from home or does not need a city, it is remarkably affordable. Number 12. Derry, Northern Ireland. Sitting on the banks of the River Foyle in the northwest corner of Northern Ireland, Derry, also known as Londonderry, is a city with layers of history visible in every street. Its 17th century walls are among the finest surviving city fortifications in Europe. For centuries, it was a garrison town, a port, and a centre of the shirt-making industry. By the early 20th century, Derry's shirt factories employed thousands of women stitching garments that were exported across the Atlantic. The city also served as a vital naval base during the Second World War, with tens of thousands of Allied troops passing through its docks. But Derry's recent history has been shaped by the Troubles, decades of conflict that scarred the city physically and economically. Investment dried up, unemployment soared. Even after the peace process transformed Northern Ireland, Derry remained one of the most affordable cities in the United Kingdom. Average rents in the northwest of Northern Ireland sit well below £700 a month for a full property. Rooms and shared accommodation come in far lower, comfortably under £300. Today, the city is changing. The Peace Bridge arcs across the Foyle. The old shirt factory district is being reimagined, but the affordability remains. And for anyone willing to look beyond Belfast, Derry offers history, culture, and a cost of living that would be unthinkable in most British cities. Number 11. Blackpool, Lancashire. Everyone knows Blackpool, the Tower, the illuminations, the Golden Mile. For over a century, it was the undisputed holiday capital of working-class Britain. At its peak in the 1950s and 1960s, Blackpool welcomed over 17 million visitors a year. Landladies ran boarding houses on every street back from the seafront, and the town pulsed with life from May to September. Then the package holiday arrived. Cheap flights to Spain and the Mediterranean pulled millions of visitors away. Decade by decade, the boarding houses emptied. Many were converted into flats and bedsits, houses of multiple occupancy that now form one of the densest concentrations of cheap rental accommodation in England. You can find rooms in Blackpool for under £250 a month, some of the cheapest in the entire country. The seafront still lights up every autumn, and the tower still stands, and the trams still rattle along the promenade. But behind the front, the streets tell a different story. Blackpool has some of the highest deprivation rates in England. Life expectancy in parts of the town is among the lowest in the country. It is a place of contradictions, famous and forgotten at the same time. For anyone considering it, the costs are undeniably low. But Blackpool asks you to look past the postcard and see the town as it really is. Number 10. East Ayrshire, Scotland. South of Glasgow, Past Kilmarnock, the landscape shifts into rolling farmland and the remains of what was once a thriving coalfield. East Ayrshire covers a stretch of southwest Scotland that few people outside the region ever think about. Its towns, Kilmarnock, Cumnock, Auchinleck, were built on coal, ironworks, and textiles. Kilmarnock was famous for its carpets and its whiskey. The Johnnie Walker bottling plant was one of the largest employers in the town for over a century. But the pits closed, the carpet factories wound down, and in 2012, Diageo closed the Johnnie Walker plant in Kilmarnock, ending a bond between the brand and the town that stretched back to the 1820s. East Ayrshire now has some of the cheapest rents in Scotland. Average monthly rents sit around £600 for a full property, but rooms and shared accommodation come in well under £300. The countryside is green and open. The coast is a short drive west. Glasgow is less than an hour by train. For the price of a single room in Edinburgh, you could rent an entire flat in parts of East Ayrshire. The value is extraordinary, even if the reasons behind it are tinged with loss. And hey, before we move on to our next entry, I hope you are enjoying this video so far. If you are, why not give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might find it useful? It really does help us out. Now, let's continue. Number 9. Stoke-on-Trent, Staffordshire. If you know anything about Stoke-on-Trent, you know it as the Potteries. For over 250 years, this cluster of 6 towns in North Staffordshire produced some of the finest ceramics in the world. Wedgwood, Royal Doulton, Spode, Minton, names that became synonymous with quality and craftsmanship. At its height, the pottery industry employed tens of thousands of workers across hundreds of factories. The bottle kilns, shaped like giant dark bottles, defined the skyline. There were once 2,000 of them. By the 1950s, clean air legislation and industrial modernization began to sweep them away. Today, fewer than 50 survive, protected as listed structures. The wider industry followed a similar path. Globalization, cheaper imports, and automation hollowed out the workforce. Factories closed or moved production overseas. Stoke-on-Trent became one of the most affordable cities in England almost by default. Average rents for a one-bedroom property hover around £650, but rooms in shared houses and cheap studios regularly come in under £300. The city is not without its charms. The canal network threads through the old industrial quarter. The Trentham estate draws visitors to its gardens. And the pottery heritage, though diminished, still pulses through the city's identity. For under £300 a month, you can live in a city that once supplied fine china to the tables of the world. Number 8. Grimsby, northeast Lincolnshire. Stand on the old dock road in Grimsby and look out across the Humber estuary, and you are looking at what was once the busiest fishing port on the planet. In the 1950s, Grimsby's trawler fleet numbered in the hundreds. The docks heaved with catches of cod, haddock, and hake hauled from the freezing waters of Iceland and the North Atlantic. The town's fish market handled tens of thousands of tons every year. Smokehouses, processing plants, and ice factories lined the waterfront. The industry supported an entire community. Not just the fishermen, but the net makers, the box makers, the merchants, the engineers who kept the trawlers running. Then came the Cod Wars. Between 1958 and 1976, a series of confrontations with Iceland over fishing rights gradually pushed British trawlers out of Icelandic waters. When the final agreement was reached, Grimsby's distant water fleet was finished. The trawlers were scrapped. The dock gates closed. Thousands of jobs vanished within a decade. Today, The old ice factory on the docks has been restored as a heritage centre. The Dock Tower, a Victorian replica of a Tuscan palazzo tower, still stands as a reminder of more prosperous times. Grimsby remains one of the cheapest places to rent in England. Rooms and shared accommodation come in well under £300. The Lincolnshire coast stretches south, flat and wide. The Humber Bridge arcs across the estuary to the north, and the town itself carries on quieter than it was, but still standing. Number 7. Bradford, West Yorkshire. Bradford was once the wool capital of the world. In the 19th century, this West Yorkshire city processed more worsted cloth than anywhere else on earth. Its warehouses, built in an extravagant Italianate style, rivaled anything in Manchester or Leeds. Merchants from Germany, Eastern Europe, and across the British Empire set up offices in what was known as Little Germany, a quarter of the city centre packed with ornate stone buildings. The wealth was immense. Bradford built grand civic buildings, public parks, and one of the finest concert halls in the north of England, St. George's Hall. But wool followed the same path as cotton: competition from abroad, changing fashions, and the decline of British manufacturing eroded the industry through the 20th century. Mills closed. The warehouses emptied. Bradford's population growth stalled, and the city slipped down the economic rankings. Today, Bradford is one of the most affordable cities in the country. Average rents sit around £525 for quality housing, and rooms in shared houses are regularly available for under £300. The city is also one of the youngest and most diverse in Britain, with a rich cultural mix that shapes its food, its festivals, and its identity. The Alhambra Theatre still draws crowds. Saltaire, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, sits just a few miles north, and Little Germany's warehouses, though quieter now, are slowly being converted into apartments and creative spaces. Bradford's story is not over, but its affordability makes it one of the most accessible cities in England. Number 6. County Durham. The name alone carries weight. County Durham is a place woven into the fabric of English industrial history. Its coalfield was one of the largest and most productive in the world. For over 2 centuries, pit villages dotted the landscape from the Wear to the Tees. Rows of terraced cottages clustered around the colliery, the winding gear visible from every back garden. At its peak in the early 20th century, the Durham coalfield employed over 170,000 miners. The Durham Miners' Gala, held every July, was one of the largest trade union gatherings in Europe, with brass bands and colourful lodge banners parading through the city streets. Then the mines began to close. Some went in the 1960s. More followed in the 1970s and 1980s, accelerated by the miners' strike of 1984 and the wave of closures that followed. The last deep mine in County Durham closed in 1994. What remained were the villages, the terraces, the welfare halls, the memorial benches. Many of these pit villages now offer some of the cheapest housing in England. Rooms can be found for well under £300 a month. The city of Durham itself, with its Norman cathedral and its castle perched above the River Wear, remains a jewel. But step outside the city and into the former coalfield, and you enter a landscape shaped by an industry that no longer exists, quiet, proud, and remarkably affordable. Number 5. Sunderland, Tyne and Wear. Follow the River Wear to the North Sea coast, and you reach Sunderland, a city that once built more ships than almost any other place on Earth. In the 19th century, a quarter of the world's ships were launched from the yards along the Wear. The river was lined with cranes, slipways, and the skeletal frames of vessels taking shape. At its peak, the shipyards employed over 30,000 workers directly and tens of thousands more in supporting industries: rope making, chain making, marine engineering. Sunderland also had a proud tradition of coal mining and glass making. The town's glass industry dates back to the 7th century, when Benedict Biscop brought glassmakers from France to create windows for the monastery at Monkwearmouth. But the 20th century was brutal. The shipyards closed one by one. The last vessel was launched from the Wear in 1988. The mines followed. The glass factories consolidated and shrank. Sunderland reinvented itself around the Nissan car plant, which opened in 1986 and remains one of the largest car factories in Europe. But the city's housing costs never recovered to match its industrial past. Average rents hover around £670 for a full property, with rooms and shared accommodation widely available for under £300. The new National Glass Centre gleams on the riverbank. The Stadium of Light rises above the old colliery site, and the seafront at Roker and Seaburn offers wide sandy beaches that rival anywhere on the East Coast. Sunderland is a city that has been knocked down and got back up more than once, and it remains one of the most affordable places to live in England. Number 4. Blaenau Gwent, South Wales. Deep in the South Wales valleys, where the hills press close and the terraced streets climb steeply from the valley floor, sits Blaenau Gwent. Its towns, Ebbw Vale, Tredegar, Bryn Mawr, Abertillery, were forged in iron and coal. Ebbw Vale's steelworks was once one of the largest in Europe. At its peak, the works employed over 14,000 people and dominated the town completely. Tredegar, just down the valley, is famous for something else entirely. It was here, in the 1890s, that a community-funded medical aid society was created. A scheme that would later inspire Aneurin Bevan, Tredegar's most famous son, to create the National Health Service in 1948. The idea that healthcare should be free at the point of need was born in these valleys, paid for by the pennies of miners and steel workers. But the industries that sustained these communities did not last. The steelworks at Ebbw Vale closed in 2002. The coal mines had gone decades earlier. The population drained away. Today, Blaenau Gwent has some of the cheapest property in all of Wales. Average house prices sit around £127,000, less than half the Welsh average. Rooms and small flats can be rented for well under £300 a month. If you walk through Tredegar today, you will find the Aneurin Bevan memorial stones in the town centre and the clock tower and the steep streets climbing towards the ridge. The valleys are green again. The spoil heaps have been grassed over, and the place that gave Britain its most cherished institution remains one of its most affordable. Number 3. Middlesbrough, Teesside. In 1801, Middlesbrough was a farmstead. Just a handful of people lived there. By 1901, its population had exploded to over 90,000. That is one of the most dramatic urban growths in British history, and it was driven by one thing: iron. When the Middlesbrough extension of the Stockton and Darlington Railway opened in 1830, it unlocked the iron ore deposits of the Cleveland Hills. Blast furnaces rose along the south bank of the Tees. At its peak, Middlesbrough produced a third of the nation's iron output. Gladstone visited the town in 1862 and reportedly called it an infant Hercules. Steel followed iron. The chemical industry followed steel. ICI's Wilton complex became one of the largest chemical plants in the world. Middlesbrough was not just a town. It was a furnace, an engine, a machine for producing the raw materials of the modern world. But the second half of the 20th century brought decline on a devastating scale. The steelworks contracted, the chemical plants downsized, unemployment soared through the 1980s and never fully recovered. Today, Middlesbrough is one of the cheapest places to rent in England. Average rents sit around £550, with rooms and shared accommodation widely available under £300. The Transporter Bridge, that extraordinary steel structure strung high across the Tees, still carries passengers in a gondola suspended from cables. It is one of only a handful of its kind left in the world, and it stands as a monument to an age when Middlesbrough bent iron and steel to its will. The town that Gladstone called an infant Hercules grew up fast. It is still finding out what comes next. Number 2. Hull, East Yorkshire. Kingston upon Hull. Almost everyone just calls it Hull. Sits where the River Hull meets the Humber estuary, and for centuries it was one of the most important ports in England. In the medieval period, it exported wool to Flanders. In the 18th century, it dominated the whale oil trade. In the 19th and 20th centuries, it was a fishing port to rival Grimsby, and a centre of trade that connected Yorkshire to Scandinavia, the Baltic, and beyond. Hull also has a stubborn, independent streak. During the English Civil War, the town shut its gates to King Charles I in 1642, an act many historians consider the first significant act of defiance that led to the war itself. William Wilberforce, who led the campaign to abolish the slave trade, was born here. Philip Larkin, one of England's greatest poets, spent the last 30 years of his life working at the University Library. But Hull has also endured more than its share of hardship. It was the most heavily bombed city outside London during the Second World War. Though wartime censorship meant it was referred to only as a northeast coast town, over 95% of its houses suffered damage. The fishing industry collapsed after the Cod Wars. The docks fell quiet. For decades, Hull sat at or near the bottom of almost every quality of life index in England. Then something shifted. In 2017, Hull became the UK City of Culture, and the effect was transformative. Millions of pounds flowed into the city. The old town was restored. New galleries, venues, and public art appeared across the centre. The city discovered a new confidence. And yet, Hull remains one of the most affordable cities in the country. Average rents are among the lowest for any true city in England, and rooms in shared houses and cheap studios can be found for well under £300 a month. The Deep, a striking aquarium shaped like the prow of a ship, rises at the confluence of the two rivers. The marina fills the old dock. The Ferrans Art Gallery, free to enter, holds one of the finest collections outside London. Hull has been underestimated for centuries. It has been bombed, bypassed, and overlooked. And still it stands, affordable and defiant, its gates still open. I hope you have been enjoying this countdown. If you have, please do share this video with someone you think would appreciate it. Every share helps us reach more people. And with that, let us move on to number 1. Number 1, Burnley, Lancashire. If you walk along the towpath of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal as it threads through the centre of Burnley, you pass beneath the shadows of old mill buildings that rise 4, 5, 6 stories above the water. Their windows are dark. Their brick is soot-stained. Some have been converted into flats and studios. Others stand empty, waiting. This is the Weaver's Triangle, and it is the heart of a town that was once, without exaggeration, the cotton-weaving capital of the world. In 1801, Burnley was a small market town with a population of around 4,000. By the middle of the 19th century, the arrival of the canal and then the railway had transformed it beyond recognition. Cotton mills sprang up along every available stretch of waterway, and road. The town switched from wool to cotton and never looked back. By 1911, Burnley had approximately 99,000 power looms in operation. Its population had swelled past 100,000. The terraced streets that climbed the hills around the town centre housed the families that fed those looms, men, women, and children working shifts in noise and heat and cotton dust. Burnley did not just contribute to the cotton trade. For a time, it led it. The cloth produced here was exported across the British Empire and beyond. The town's engineers developed the Burnley loom, considered one of the finest in the world. Queen Street Mill, built in 1894, became the last steam-powered weaving mill in the country, its engine running right up until 1982. But the decline, when it came, was relentless. Japanese manufacturers began producing cotton at a fraction of the cost as early as the 1930s. The two world wars disrupted exports. After 1945, the industry never recovered. Mills closed at a devastating pace. By the 1980s, the chimneys that had once defined the skyline were being demolished one by one. The population fell. The terraced houses, built to last but no longer in demand, became some of the cheapest in England. Today, Burnley is consistently ranked as the most affordable place to live in the United Kingdom. Average house prices sit at around £121,000. Private rents average roughly £550 to £600 for a one-bedroom property. But rooms in shared houses and bedsits can be found for well under £300 a month, some for as little as £200. Daily expenses are equally low. A meal in a local restaurant costs less than a third of what you would pay in London. The town has decent rail links to Manchester, access to the Pennine countryside, and a slowly growing sense of regeneration. The Weavers' Triangle has been designated a conservation area. Former mills are being converted into housing. The canal towpath has been restored and is now a walking and cycling route. And Queen Street Mill, that last steam-powered weaving shed, was preserved as a working museum, a place where you can still hear the clatter of the looms, beans, and feel the vibration of a 500-horsepower engine beneath your feet. Burnley's story is one of the great industrial parables of modern Britain, a town that rose from nothing to become the weaving capital of the world, that clothed an empire, that packed 100,000 people into its valley, and then watched it all unravel. Slowly, decade by decade, loom by loom. If you stand on the canal bridge at the edge of the Weavers' Triangle, on a quiet morning, with the water still and the mill walls rising on either side, you can almost hear it. The hum of the engines, the clatter of the shuttles, the echo of 100,000 looms, now silent. Burnley is not just the cheapest place to live in Britain. It is a reminder that even the mightiest industries are borrowed, not permanent, and that silence eventually finds its way in. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Make sure to share it with your friends, and I will see you in the next one.